Hi, Michael. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us on the Everyday Mystic.
Good morning. It's so wonderful to get to connect with you and to meet your community of podcast listeners. Thank you so much for welcoming me on your podcast today.
Well, you're so welcome. I'm really excited to talk about the core of your work. The book you've written, the core of your thesis, and what you've been focused on recently. But before we get to all that good juicy stuff, I want to talk about you and your journey. We talk on this podcast to people that I consider, myself included, everyday mystics. We are those who are finding this mystical opening in our everyday life. And your book and the method that you've created absolutely does that and points to that. But I know that you came to that on a longer journey that wasn't just, oh, this book popping up out of you. So tell us a little bit about your own, spiritual, mystical journey. What was it for you that I guess awoke you to, maybe there's more to life than just this 3D physical experience?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I just love the idea and the term of an everyday mystic, and I I really resonate deeply with that. I think it's I've always been a sensitive individual, just very aware of the beauty of the natural world around me and feeling a connection to, spirit or God, the universe, and I just love what you're doing. So um, it kind of connects a lot of dots for me. So thank you so much for the
You're
work you're doing in the
welcome. Thank
world.
you.
And my journey, I I'm a medical doctor, and I'm studying the emotion of awe and wonder, which is one of the tenets of the everyday mystic experience. And um, for me, the journey came about at a pretty young age. I wanted to be a doctor since I was basically, I think, 2 or 3 years old. Like when I was a little kid, I just loved playing doctor and something I always dreamed to do. And as I continued on my path of my undergrad and then, you know, studying for the MCAT, I started having more and more anxiety and kind of actually was having panic attacks taking exams. And it happened during taking the MCAT, the entrance exam for med school. I had my first experience of a full experience of a panic attack where my heart was racing and my mind shut down. And I was really at a crossroads where I had to figure out either to take medications and work with a psychiatrist to manage my test taking anxiety, or to begin to find more natural, holistic ways of managing this part of my mind. And a friend told me about a Buddhist meditation retreat, and I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat after that experience, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I've been now a student of Buddhist meditation for over 30 years and trained as a Dharma teacher, as a meditation teacher out here in California at a place called Spirit Rock Meditation Center, in a 2-year program. I've led now probably thousands of patients through mindfulness programs for chronic pain, and also started a meditation community. It actually was an interfaith community for not just Buddhists, but people that identify as like Jewish or Muslim, Christian, just a full integration of contemplative spiritual practices in a spiritual community, and led that for a number of years. And it was, I would say, about 5, 6 years ago, I was having a conversation with my mentor and friend, colleague, Jake Eagle, who's a psychotherapist in Hawaii. And we were talking about how we've noticed that our students struggled with keeping a daily mindfulness practice, meditation practice going, that it's often takes a lot of effort and a certain amount of time and commitment. And people really struggle in this busy world that we're living in to keep that going day
Well,
in and
let's
day
go
out.
back. Yeah, let's go back
Yeah.
to what your first Vipassana, a 10-day, that's intense. Never meditated before. You drop into a 10-day silent meditation retreat. What was that like for you, going from anxiety and panic attacks and dropping into that?
Well, um, I'll have to say, I've told people this, that I think that the first 10 day Vipassana retreat was harder than all of medical school combined. I mean, it was definitely one of the hardest 10 days of my life. Just really learning to see my mind and its activity, the intensity of its activity and kind of things that it was obsessing on, and was was making myself anxious with. And I also experienced in those 10 days a deep sense of peace and healing from that as well. So on the one hand, there was an intensity that got even more intense, but then learning very constructive skills to work with what they call in the meditation community our monkey mind. You know, the mind that's sort of jumping all over to different places, the wandering mind, as well as the kind of obsessional mind that for me it's around. It was like a sense of self-doubt. Like I would have this voice in my head that said, you can't do this. You're not going to get your dream of wanting to be a doctor one day. You suck. You're a failure. Um, and then that kind of, it's like a train would leave the station, and it was like hard to get the train back and calm it down. Um, so from that experience, I definitely learned um, about myself in a way that I never knew was possible, and then the skills to kind of keep the mind in check. And it's interesting because once you get into medical school, you have to take many more exams, and that voice would come up at times. I mean, I can remember, sitting there on a computer when I'm taking different board exams, and there's many of them we have to take, and just being able to, at a certain point in time, learn to ignore it. Like, okay, I see you there. Because the thing is with meditation is if you try to suppress something, it makes it worse. Like if you try to say, mind, stop you can't stop your mind. And if you even say to yourself, I'm going to stop this, it's sort of like you're feeding this monster, this dragon, more fuel to make it louder in a sense. And what it for me has been is about learning to redirect, focus on something that is positive, whether it's a gratitude practice or an awe practice of being like aware of the experience of the wonder and miracles of life in the ordinary times of our lives. And so this has been, I appreciate this question because it's really kind of putting me in a framework of like looking at my life's trajectory and why I am now where I've kind of arrived with studying awe and wonder. Because what we talk about in our book and what we know from our research with hundreds of patients that we've studied is we believe this practice is actually probably the fastest way that we know to reset our nervous system and to take us into the present moment. It's a 10 to 15-second practice that just transports us back into the present and puts us in what we call a state of spacious consciousness, which is that transcendent spiritual state of awakening.
So you were talking about how you and Jake realized after your decades of meditation that students you were guiding through processes of meditation were not necessarily either adhering or they were having difficulty. They just were not getting anything out of it because they were having a hard time even entering the space, right? So how did then awe come to you as this, oh, well, this could be a way, as in a means for those types of students, which I think are, I won't even say just those types of students, but just the modern human, it seems, who is we're inundated with information and distraction at a degree that probably we haven't been before. I'm not going to go Graham Hancock way into the past. Like who knows? We could have had, this technology way, 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 way back if you believe some of those theories. But, as far as our own current knowledge, we are filled with many more distractions than it seems like ever before. So the modern human is facing that, but also there's this easefulness with technology and things that kind of make life easier to some degree. So we're in this interesting place of where we are, on the one hand, not inundated with, all of our daily, the struggle of daily life as much, but then we get the invitation to then go into deeper realms because we're kind of taking care of those daily needs, right? The lowest form of Maslow's hierarchy, like, done. That's good. So it seems like with that complexity of life comes many, and then the distractions that modern life has provided for us, really, right, has given us even more for that monkey mind to jump around to, right? So um
Yeah,
your
it's what I think.
method, yeah, I mean, your method just, it seems, not, I wouldn't just say just for people who have difficulty with meditation, but just the modern human in general, because of this state that we're living in.
Yeah, so they talk about this idea of what's called the attention economy,
Yeah.
and that a lot of the devices that we have in our lives, whether it's like a television, a computer, or cell phones, and all the apps, they're all vying for our attention, and they're designed in a way to give us that sort of dopaminergic addiction level of hit of a rush of some dopamine to vie our attention. And so if we are awake about 16 hours, 17 hours of the day, there's a competition going on between all these different um, or companies that are vying for our attention, um, whether through advertisement, um, or like using Instagram, Facebook, or whatever,
Yeah.
TikTok.
Did you see
Um,
the social net? Well, I think it was called The Social Network, but did you see that? Yeah. The movie about really the genesis of social media and what they use to, the essentially mimic a gambling addiction, right? Of like, we're always looking for that, the thumbs up, and all of the triggers that are included within social media do provide a not only distraction, but then, like you said, a dopamine hit, a sense of reward, so it's playing into this ancient system of ours, but in such a vacuous kind of way. I mean, what kind of reward is getting a thumbs up on a post? I mean, it's not real. It's really empty. So I think it leaves a
yeah,
lot of people empty. It's the ones who get very addicted and spend their time there.
exactly. And we're seeing all the really bad consequences. I know you have a child, and my child grew up with these apps, and it's really interesting. I watched her really shun them away, and that was actually one of the things she wrote in her college essay, was that she consciously chose to get off Snapchat and Instagram and different social media apps because she knew it was destroying the quality of her life. She just is a spiritual child, and kind of an old soul and ahead of the game in many ways. And so it's really interesting to see how she reacted to it and knew that it was controlling her life, because these apps are designed in ways to hook young people. And even right now, in this particular time and age in 2024, we're seeing, you know, there was just Senate hearings on how these apps
Right.
are causing young people to commit suicide because of the amount of stress that it's on them.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what, I think one of the things I love about this practice of awe that we've come up with, and really we stumbled upon it, I would say, in many ways, um, is that it's a simple practice that takes 15 seconds to do, that wherever we are, we can actually practice this really profound moment of awe and wonder, and bring us back to the present moment. And if we look at research that's been done in the study of awe in different populations on the planet, North Americans have the lowest amount of awe in their lives. On average, people don't even have one experience of awe in a week in their daily life, which is, we've learned from our research and other people's research, it's the most important of all positive emotions. That's why we titled our book "The Power of Awe," because it is the most powerful positive emotions out there.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love, you say it in your book and in the work. I also attended your workshop. So you had recalled you saying how awe is the only emotion that can actually be, I guess, instigated in a a moment of, I guess, what we'll call in a state of negative emotion or a state of positive emotion. So if you're feeling depressed, you can initiate awe. If you're feeling happy, you can initiate awe, whereas other emotions didn't fall within that kind of pattern. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. We have a chapter in our book where we talk about the unique property of Oz that, let's say you're going through a really hard time in your life and you're going through depression or you're feeling anxious. You can't just say to yourself, hey, I want to be happy today. You can't force happiness to happen. You can't force anxiety to stop. But whether you're experiencing some state of depression because of maybe a divorce or death of a family member, some period of sadness in your life, or you're going through an anxious time, we can always access the emotion of awe. Awe is free and readily available all the time. So, and then when we get to that state of awe, it helps to in many ways dampen the intensity of that anxious or depressed state. We
Mhm.
can hold the two together, which is really unique in terms of its ability to be held with a sad or negative emotion. At the same time, you can have this positive experience.
Mhm.
Um, and
That's so
sorry, go
fascinating.
ahead.
No, that's just fascinating how, right, it is kind of lives in the middle. And even in the pure definition of awe, right? It's something that invokes both a wonder, but also a terror, right? There's like that level of where it lives between, where it can be either positive or negative, depending on what it is, I guess, that is striking you.
Yeah, we make a distinction in our book, and this is also based upon the neuroscience research of Oz, that we really have two different emotions that are going on at this in terms of the fear-based awe, which is sort of that sense of terror, and it's often that's what's connotated in the Bible of like having a fear
Mm,
of God, of being in awe of God. That actually goes down a different pathway in the brain in terms of stimulating the amygdala and that kind of like that fear state of the brain. And then what I guess we could say is more of a positive awe, um, that sense of kind of wonder and amazement, and that is elating, that enlivens us and gives a
mhm,
sense of connection. Um, to the vastness of all life, that goes through a different circuitry in the brain. So
mm,
even though we're using this terminology of awe, I would say in many ways they're two separate emotions.
yeah,
And
that
I think we can all relate to that too, right? That the experience of seeing like destruction and some like intensity of a storm that evokes fear is a very different experience than,
yes.
standing at a beautiful sunset and looking out and feeling that sense of open-heartedness and connection to all things.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. The What do you think? Do you have theories on what, why in our day and age, awe or the experience of awe is, like you were saying, at least among North Americans, where we're not even experiencing one event, awe event a week. I would say it's probably less for most people too, of where, they don't even, their awe is just a foreign concept to them. We're so, like we mentioned, we're so consumed by our environment here. But what do you have other theories as to, why did awe go away so much? I think that maybe, I don't know. I guess I'm picturing more ancient times where when we didn't quite understand what was going on, then awe was more natural because you were just like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what this is. So awe was maybe just more commonplace than it might be now because we seem to have so many things figured out. And that's my theory. What's your theory on, why it might not be as common for us?
Well, I think it has to do with it's like where we are as a civilization and the attention and like what is taking our attention in what direction. So if you think of like a young child, right? And children live in that sense of awe and wonder. Like they are looking at the world and there's this like constant sense of amazement and wonder, and they live in that sense of childlike curiosity. And as we, enter in our teenage years, and then we start to get our focuses in different places, and then we get sucked into our devices and our careers and the general meme of like what we believe life is supposed to be like in this modern world. Um, and then our attention is no longer in that space of childlike wonder and amazement. And we're focused in other ways. And if you look at like a lot of different spiritual teachings, it's all about coming back to living life. It's about bringing our attention to, seeing the miracles and the beauty and the wonder of everyday living. I could share some quotes right now of some great poetry. Like, for example, Mary Oliver, she gives like this like 3-line, very simple poem that's called Instructions for Living a Life. Number 1, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it.
Mm.
So bring your attention to like what you see around you, like live life in radical amazement. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who is like thought of as sort of the awe rabbi, and he was close contemporary friends with Martin Luther King Jr., and there's photos of him walking on Selma Bridge hand in hand. He said, to quote him, "Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed."
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing in this very simple awe practice is we're learning to find the awe. In many ways, I call it the extraordinary in the ordinary, to find the beauty and the wonder in the everyday life and to start to see the world in that way. And so it starts off for people, you're training yourself and you experience this in a temporary state, but over time, it becomes a permanent trait of who you are as a person. So I'll give an example, I think, that exemplifies, yes, we have all this great technology, but then it takes awe away from us. So one of the ways I love to experience awe when I first get up in the morning is when I make a cup of coffee. I love using a French press so I can open the bag of grounds and I can smell them and just enjoy the aroma of it and the richness of the smell and the flavor. I get to boil water and see the steam rising, and then the French press is clear glass and I get to see the grounds floating in the warm water. And I can touch the carafe with my warm, and feel the warmth going through my hands and just enjoy that warmth on a cold winter morning. And then get to press it down and, then get to flavor it and taste it and put it in the foamy milk and all that. That is like such an amazing human sensual awe experience. But for most people, what they do is they take a plastic pod, and they put it in a machine and push a button. And then like 30 seconds later, a pretty sterile coffee comes out in a cup, and that's what they enjoy. That's it. They don't get to have any more sensual experience of this like simplicity of making it. It's simple making coffee, but it's like can be a truly, and we call it an orgasm. That extreme experience that's like rich and lush and exciting and fulfilling. And then when you get to start your day in that way, it just launches you off to see that the miracles and the beauty of everyday life all around us. So my recommendation is get rid of some of these things that make our lives supposedly easier, because they're taking away your awe.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. There's something really that's just so rich around the simplicity, the simple things of everyday living that we have lost because we let technology do all that for us.
Are you aware of this concept of, I forget what it's called, but you might know, where it's a specific type of reward that comes from doing something with your hands, creating something, making something with your hands. And it has a term that I cannot recall, but I've been experiencing that lately, making sourdough bread. And it's a new venture for me. It was one of those things that I put off for years. I've had been gifted and thrown away so many sourdough starters because it ends up in my fridge and it's just like this sludgy, disgusting thing. I'm like, I guess I'm just going to throw it away. But I had this one, and during the Christmas, New Year's break, I pulled it out and I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sourdough bread. And I called my friend who gave it to me. And it literally looked like poison. There was this gray sludge on the top, and it just did not look good. And she said, "Oh no, it's still good. Just, she told me what to do and walked me through the process. It did feel good to have a friend who I could go to about that. But then she pointed me to some recipes, and then I just, I did it, and I just started going. And it's a kind of complex food making process for sure, but it's simple. It is flour, water, salt. Can't get more simple than that as far as ingredients. And even what you do is simple. It just is, it's spread out over a long time. But the things that you get to do, talk about sensorial awegasm. I mean, you are pushing your hands through this dough and actually feeling it. And the sourdough uh, bakers that I read about and follow were like, don't do it in a mixer. Do it with your hands. Like, you've got to feel this dough. And I was like, yeah, I want to feel the dough. Like, that's
Yeah.
why I'm here. And so you get to do that and feel it. And then you go through all these processes, and you're actually, uh, you're moving and growing along with the dough because it's going through this process of rising and as it's fermenting, and you get to experience all of that with it. And then you get to experience this incredible, if you like bread, incredible end product that you experience the whole of. And that's been my most recent awe filled experience from really something so simple. Something, just getting back to doing something with my hands, because I spend a lot of time, on this machine, right? I'm doing a lot of computer stuff, a lot of screen stuff. And when I can just step away and go to the dough, or, step away and go into the woods, it's just, the most precious part of my day.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing. I think the terminology might be just hands-on experience. I don't. I was just curious while we were chatting, and I looked that up. I said, "Oh, it's called hands-on experience," but
Yeah, it's like this technical reward. It's a term. It's like a scientific technical term for
yeah,
this specific type of reward
uh-huh. But
system. Anyway.
yeah, I think it's a great example of what we call in our book. We talk about there sort of being three categories of awe, and the easiest one for us to sort of train ourselves to access is awe of the senses, sensorial awe that you were talking about. And so kinesthetic, touching things is one great way to experience that. And I think maybe an easy way for the listener to try this today would be is to try eating a meal with your hands rather than using a
Mm,
fork or a spoon. And there's actually research that says that we digest our food better when we eat with our hands, because there's a direct. Our ancestors, first of all, they ate with their hands,
yeah.
and and there is a direct connection, that when we do eat with our hands, we secrete the digestive enzymes and stuff. There's when we feel the food in our hands, it's a signal to the brain and says, okay, let all those different enzymes to digest the proteins and the fats and things be released.
Mm,
So I personally find that a great way of experiencing awe is to feel your food,
mm,
um, and the
I love that.
textures. Yeah.
Yeah. And um, doing it with, that sense of focus, right? The
Hmm.
the just like you said, putting your attention to it, which is the A of the awe method, right? Let's walk a little through that, because we're talking about awe as a concept and an emotion, but then you created a method using the word of awe, but turning it into an acronym, right, for the stages for the method. And that A is attention, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we use the word awe, AWE, and we turn it into an acronym, which is the three steps for this very simple practice of experiencing awe in the ordinary. So A is attention. And what we're asking you to do is to bring your full undivided attention to something that you value, appreciate, or find amazing. So in the space that you're in right now, if as you're listening to this, maybe you're at home, you could just look in the room around you. Maybe there's a piece of art, or maybe there's a tool you have like scissors or pens that you can be in awe of, and it's just something very simple you can find amazing. And then the W stands for wait. And so we're allowing ourselves this opportunity to just really be with that idea, that memory, that object that we find amazing.
Mm.
And in this very busy world where our attention is always being taken away to different places, we're gifting ourselves this moment of just being with us for 5 to 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the E stands for two things. One is a nice long exhalation out. When we take that nice long exhale out, we can even all do it together right now. Take a
Mm-hmm.
breath in, nice long exhale out. Yeah, immediately you can just feel yourself calm down and be more present. And that's because the vagus nerve, which is the master computer, so to speak, of the autonomic nervous system, the part of our nervous system that controls our heart rate, our respiratory rate, and all these processes that we're not consciously have to think about doing in our body, it puts us in that state of rest, repair, and healing by simply taking that nice long exhale out, which is what a moment of awe, those big moments of awe, they kind of give you that sense of like being really present and calm.
Mm-hmm.
And then the E also stands for expansion, because when we have a moment of awe, we often feel like a sense of energy releasing. You may
Mm-hmm.
recall maybe going to a really big, beautiful view and feeling the hair on your arms kind of stand up and tingle. And so we're allowing that experience to happen in our body when we
Mm-hmm.
do the practice. We want to let it expand and get bigger than our physical self.
I
And
think
that's
it's
this.
fascinating that, when you do have one of those big awe moments, you naturally exhale, right? You're just like, ah.
Yeah, and
It's
even
kind of,
you make the sound ah, right? You're like
yeah,
ah.
yeah, yeah.
It's
So
like what kind?
that step by step of going back to the A of drawing your attention to something and pulling your focus to that thing, which is simple enough to do, certainly, right? It's just like, look at it, focus upon it for a few seconds. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, now your entire attention is moving towards this thing for the rest of your life. Don't ever look at your phone. I love the process or the method because there's not you're not making a choice between living in the modern life or becoming a Buddhist monk in the mountains of Tibet. Like you're moving into and allowing that process of not only awe, but just all of the benefits of that come from it, the calm and the state of wonder, really the bigger connection to source and to God, all of that, allowing that to happen, but through a simple process that begins with awareness, begins with drawing your attention to something. And we can all do that. We can all, just focus upon something. It's choice, however, right? And so people choosing not to choosing, let's say, to focus on all the shitty things going on and all the distracting things going on. Certainly you can it can feel difficult even to draw attention away from that for some. So do you have I guess just maybe a few words of advice for somebody who is just having a real hard time even just noticing something and paying attention to? I mean, I would say an epidemic of, not a real epidemic, but I think a kind of manufactured epidemic of ADHD right now, where there's a lot of people claiming ADHD. Oh yeah, I know now that I'm an adult, I have ADHD, and that was my problem my whole life. And oh, my kid has ADHD, and everyone's on meds, and I just see this more and more popping up, and having that ready excuse of like, oh, I can't pay attention to that. So what would you say? Like, what's some words of advice for someone who's having some real difficulty actually just even doing that first step?
Well, I would say that there is research that shows that our attention spans are the amount of time that we can focus our attention is decreasing. And this is a result of the apps that we're using. Like if you're on Instagram and you're scrolling and you look at a picture literally for a quarter of a second, you just keep going and going. I mean, you're by doing this repetitively day in and day out, you are training your brain to have a lower attention span. I
Mm.
mean, that's just matter of fact. So, but what I do love about this practice is that people, and we know this from our research, that people that even struggle with being what's called, the terminology is neurodivergent nowadays. That's the term they use for ADHD, but basically people whose brains maybe have a lower attention span, they can do this practice because really it takes just 10 to 15 seconds. And anyone
Mhm.
can at least focus their mind on something for a matter of a cycle of a breath or two. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's what I love about this practice. It is very simple to do.
Mm.
And it's a very short practice. And the other thing that I think is really important about why this practice is so helpful for people and why it works is that you get a reward immediately when you have a moment of awe. When you experience a moment of awe, you feel more enlivened. You also are more present. You're more relaxed. Awe is what's called a prosocial emotion. So connected within awe is all these other positive benefits. Awe makes us more generous. We're more giving to people, like even to
Mm.
strangers. Um, Awe makes us more connected to the sense of the world, to whether you want to call it, God or the universe, or just to other humans or animals on the planet. We are just more open-minded politically to see divergent points of view. It also creates a sense of empathy and connection and love. So there's all these benefits that come from a moment of awe. But even just practicing this short 10 to 15 second practice, you do feel good. Like it's a energizing yet calming practice.
Mhm.
Whereas like a traditional meditation, you can sit for 10 or 15 minutes and your mind has been racing the whole time and going all over the place, and you're feeling back pain from sitting so long, and you've
Mhm.
struggled to focus your mind, and you often feel kind of defeated. Like you just like, man, this is hard work and I didn't really feel like I got anything out of this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I see you're nodding like, I'm talking about.
Totally. I mean, I didn't meditate for years because it was hard for me. It was hard
Mhm.
for me to settle down my mind and get into that spaciousness. And I would it would push me away from it because it was hard, to do, and I didn't have the discipline to stick with it. Um and also wasn't getting that immediate reward, I would say. So that, yeah, you're right. I mean, absolutely, um, is when you get an immediate reward, yeah, it's going to encourage you, incentivize you to keep going, keep doing. I mean, now I meditate regularly. I feel like I've moved into even a state of being where I'm in a meditative state often throughout the day, even just from that depth of meditation in my life. But it is, it took a long time to get there and to achieve that, because, and not just because, oh, it was hard, but because there, there's, you get in your own, it's not just your thoughts that you're trying to quiet and, just put aside and watch them float like a leaf down the river. Like, it's not just those thoughts, but then piled on it are, just like you said, the thoughts of, I can't do this. This isn't working. I'm failing at this. Like, you start to then pile on the other thoughts of the, like, oh, this is ridiculous, right? And that all, just kind of compounds the whole situation of it being hard, or something that you want to avoid, maybe, rather than go towards, you want to move away from.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you hit it on the nail, so to speak. And in Buddhism, they call this idea the second arrow. So like where the idea is that, you're trying to do your meditation practice and you're having a hard time, and that's just the reality you are. It's just like you're experiencing a difficulty with focusing your mind, and then your reactivity to the fact that you can't focus your mind, you start to beat yourself up, and that's sort of the second arrow that you're just, you know, you're harming yourself with those types of thought patterns.
Yeah.
And what we know from this, our research studies, and we've studied this in two large research studies, is that the more people practice this brief moment of awe, the more benefit they get. So it's what we call a dose response. So we asked people in the research just to practice 3 times a day, but people that did it 6 times a day or 10 times a day had more benefit from the practice.
Mm.
And because it only takes 10 to 15 seconds to do, there's really no reason why you can't do this, 100 times a day, just scattered throughout your day. And we encourage people to do what's called habit stacking. So when you have ordinary habits you do throughout your day, like making a cup of coffee, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, you can have a moment of awe be attached to those experiences. Like there actually is a lot of awe that you can have around flossing and brushing your teeth. I mean, it sounds silly. If you really
Mm-hmm.
stop and pay attention and enjoy that experience, like, wow, like this is something that's pretty profound. Like our daily self-care activities can actually be quite awe-inspiring.
Mm.
Um, and
So,
can
yeah,
add a very
going back to the A, okay, so just walking through the method, drawing attention, A, do you, I have one question about that, and then I want to move to the weight part, and I have a question about that. With the what you are putting your attention towards, do you recommend it being something that is visually right here with you, or a thought, or does it matter?
it really doesn't matter at all. Some people maybe struggle with finding something in the space that they're in. Um, I, but so you can use a memory. And so you could just use
Mm.
a memory of a precious memory maybe you have of when you were a child, of being with a grandparent or your parents or a sibling or something, or a dear friend. And you can close your eyes and relive that moment in the present moment and just bring your full attention to that. That can be a moment of awe.
Mhm. And I
And I would
remember in the
say,
workshop too, there was one of the classes was recommending like, focus on something, even that is still a mystery, like whether it's a mystery just to you or to humanity itself. And think about that. Think about, like how are we staying, on this planet as it's spinning through space and we're just, here. Think about something that maybe you haven't figured out or that we haven't as a species, and just put your attention on that for a moment and go, oh, whoa, that's wild. That's wonderful.
yeah, exactly. What you'll find as you learn to do this practice is that you have like a natural propensity to having awe in different ways. So some people are very sensorial. So like their awe happens, maybe it's more visual, or like looking how light casts through trees and shadows. Like that can be like a moment of awe. Or maybe it's listening to really beautiful music or playing music or eating with your hands or this or feeling the wind or the breeze on your face when you're out walking your dog. It can be simple as that. And then like you talked about just now, awe of concepts, like being in awe and blown away with this understanding of the natural world around us and physics and astronomy, and like, wow, like here we are on this planet floating 100 million miles away from the sun. And if we were just 100, 10 million miles closer or 10 million miles farther from the sun, there'd be no life on this planet. It'd be either too hot or too cold. Like we're in this sweet spot where all this
Mm.
beauty lives on this planet. I mean, just like how amazing is that? And then we get to
Yeah.
experience consciousness. We get we get to like have deep conversations and philosophize with people. Like all that is awe inspiring.
Hmm. And is there a third type of awe that you review in the book outside of conceptual and sensorial?
Yeah, we talk about awe of connection. That's the awe that we have with each other as humans that, brings that depth and beauty of love and compassion and intimacy. And it can also be with our pets and other, creatures and sentient beings on the planet. You might have like a sense of connection to the plant that lives in your room. and knowing that it brings beauty. I mean, plants are living things and they actually are able to communicate with each other, and they're probably communicating with us, just that we're usually not aware of it because we don't bring our
Yeah,
attention enough to the plants to listen to them. But
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I think within one of or more of those three categories, every listener could find something that they could put their attention towards that would be something to find awe in. And then the W of the waiting. What are we waiting for when we wait?
Well, the way I like to think of the wait is this idea, when you're walking with a friend through a doorway and they're ahead of you and they hold the door open and they're there in many ways gifting you, like they're giving you this like moment of you getting to pass through the door. And it feels good because someone's caretaking you.
Mhm,
So I think of the W as an opportunity to caretake yourself. You're giving yourself this gift, this period of brief amount of time to really enjoy, to really fully be with that experience. We can bring our attention to something for a few seconds, but then to give ourselves 5 or 6 more seconds to just really soak it in, to just fully be with it. It's a gift. It really is. It sounds maybe
mm,
kind of silly, but when we slow down and then we can really fully be present with something or a memory or an idea and really get to soak it in and marinate in it, it's that is the W. That's the waiting. We're just really letting
mm,
ourselves enjoy that pleasurable experience of being with that, of which we brought our attention to.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
and sometimes you have like an extended awe. I mean, this practice we designed, we think of them as training wheels. So basically, we're teaching people this technique, which we know works because we've studied it with a lot of people. And it's a training wheels to kind of develop this this temporary state of awe, which hopefully over time becomes a trait of who you are as a person, so that ultimately you don't need to do this awe practice, but that you just live your life and you're going through the day and you're like, and then all of a sudden awe just bubbles up and it's like, wow, that's just like, that's amazing. And I'm a medical doctor. And so I get to have these moments of awe during my patient care day. I mean, I bring this into my room with patients. I'll talk to them and say like, hey, it's great to see you again. You want to share a moment of awe like you've had in the last since I last saw you last month. And they'll share a story. And and what's really beautiful about awe is that when someone shares their awe,
Mhm,
awe is contagious so that you experience awe. Like if someone shares an awe inspiring moment they've had, you're like, oh yeah, like that's like really awe inspiring. And you actually can feel it in your body in that moment. You're like, wow, I just got a
mm,
hit of awe.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right?
That's awesome, and I think, like you were saying, the pro-social aspect of it, right? Really connects us, and we can feel it and feel the awe through other people's experience. So the more that we do share, and in that quote you shared earlier, that was her third step, right? Tell it, um, right? The attention, and I forget what the second thing was, but then the third bit of that, those lessons for living a life was tell it. And I think that is an important aspect of how we not only deepen it for ourselves, but
Hmm.
allow it to then, you know, become more, you just like you're breathing it into reality, right? You tell it, you get to actually speak it into reality.
Yeah, it has it's very palpable, right? When often awe has like a little bit of an ephemeralness to it, and sometimes it's hard to describe. But then when you get to put it down in words, it can take away from the experience actually when you do that. Sometimes when you try to verbalize something that is nonverbal, it can change that experience. But there is something really powerful around making it in a way concrete that you can share it with other people.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's I really encourage the listeners to just try this and to not push themselves hard. In our experience is that when people apply a lot of force to experiencing awe, and then they tend to have a block. It like doesn't happen. It's like the same thing I shared earlier when I was going through a panic attack and I'm like trying to like force my mind from doing that. It makes it worse.
Mm.
Um, And it's so we have to be just gentle and easeful. And then in that spaciousness, the awe arises. Like you can't go to the edge of the Grand Canyon and be like, hey, I want to have a profound moment of awe right now. It just happens when you show up and you're present. You're like, whoa, wow. And then you experience the awe, but you can't force it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that because that's speaking of surrender, right? That you just
Mm,
surrender to the moment, surrender to the practice, the moment, this beautiful whatever you're putting your focus on, or this mysterious thing you're putting your focus on. And surrender is obviously such a strong aspect of spirituality, just letting go into the mystery and letting go into the embrace of the universe, of God, the creator, and actually being able to settle into that. Is there such a incredible, I think, set of processes or outcomes from that, which it's not an easy act, but it's a simple act of
hmm.
surrender, right? It's not easy to do necessarily, but when you do, it's just like profound in how much just rushes in when you just simply let go.
Yeah, it is kind of a funny paradox, right? Because the efforting is in learning to let go. But once you've let go, then there's no effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really kind of funny in that way. I mean, there's some examples I could share about in my life where like you put a lot of effort finally learning to let go, and then you let go, and then it's like, oh, this is easy.
Right. Like, why did I spend 20 years trying to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Well, I am
resistance.
excited for people to pick up your book. It's The Power of Awe. Jake Eagle is Michael's co-author and his friend and mentor as well. And it's a beautiful book because not only what I found interesting about this is that yes, there's the practice, and you talk through the studies and you talk through the efficacy of the studies and all that's in there, and then those three steps that we just talked about. But then there's other things. There's other exercises and other ways and means too of connecting to awe and this emotion and deepening the practice. So it takes you on a journey, and it's very high utility. You're really talking about living a better life through this practice, easing anxiety, depression, even chronic pain. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know that that's your medical practice. You work with a lot of chronic pain patients, right? So, are you
Yeah,
helping actually relieve physical symptoms like that as well?
yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of like how this works with chronic pain, and I actually lead these 8 week long programs and the awe practice is sort of the foundation of what we teach in these 8 week programs. But that the way we process pain in our nervous system and our brain and our spinal cord is that when we are our thoughts, our beliefs, and and with energy and movement, like what we're doing and activities in our life, we can either increase our experience of pain, our perception of pain, or we can, dampen it down. And by experiencing awe, we can decrease the intensity in people's perception of pain. And we know it works, and we've measured that in our research studies. There's a very simple mathematical equation we could say around like how pain works. So suffering equals pain times resistance. So the
Mm,
more we resist our pain, the more we are pushing away from it, fighting it, using force against it, then the more we suffer.
yeah.
But if we're less resistant, and awe helps us be less resistant. When we're in awe, we're living more with presence, with more ease, with more acceptance. So the injury or the accident that may have caused the pain initially, when we have less resistance, our perception of pain is much less, and we don't suffer, or we suffer much less.
Yeah. That's like reminding me of the second arrow thing you were mentioning earlier, right? That resistance piece is just adding to it, or it's like the suffering, and then it exponentiates the actual pain. Oh, that's fascinating. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that. Um, it also helps in those kinds of cases because among our fellow humans, we've got, I mean, those are all pretty common, you know, common ailments, common problems with a lot of people. It's pain, it's anxiety, depression, or some type of mental health debilitation. Those two things make up unfortunately a large portion of our population, it seems, here, at least in the West. And to be able to use a practice, and actually, I think, and maybe you and Jake, I don't know if you actually studied this or contemplated it, but the fact that it's something that you yourself can do, adding then to the power of it working, rather than, when you go see an expert and then they administer something and you're kind of giving your power over to that expert, uh, there might be a difference then in how it lands with you or how it actually does impact and change you versus this thing that you do yourself, and through that layering of the empowerment, or the self reliance, that you are gaining from it, then there's an added benefit. Is that something that you looked at?
Yeah, definitely. The this practice does give one a sense of empowerment. Many times people with chronic illness feel victimized by their health condition, and it's a it's a what we call a type of, we have in our book, we talk about these 5 types of strife and the way in which we suffer, and one of them is victimization. And so the awe practice is a way of empowering ourselves, helping to expand our identity so that instead of just identifying with your pain, and I see this with chronic pain patients, and the way they talk about their experience is like, it's my pain, my OxyContin,
Mm,
my my suffering. And so what the awe practice does is it really literally expands your identity of who you are as a person.
mm,
So if we think mathematically, if you say there's 10 parts of your identity before you learn the awe practice, and one part is your past trauma of a rough childhood, and then you have the trauma of maybe a bad accident, and then you have the identity of of having had back surgery, and then you have identity of maybe being a diabetic or going through divorce, and maybe there's a little bit of a good identity, maybe you have a good relationship with the child, but in whole you have this like really tight constricted suffering identity. But then you start to throw the awe practice in and starting to open your eyes up to the beauty and the wonder of everyday living. Your identity, instead of having 10 parts, now can increase to 20 parts, and then 30 parts and 40 parts. And as you increase the diversity of your identity with all these other beautiful things that you can find to experience a sense of self and purpose in the world, those suffering parts are diluted and they are less impactful on who you are as a person.
mm,
That's a principle I teach in my program with the patients, is that we're expanding your identity through these types of practices. I ask people with chronic pain to spend time like looking at beautiful art or creating art or listening to beautiful music or creating music. There's a plethora of research that shows that there's all these things that we can do to empower ourselves so that our brains processing of the pain signals become less and less and less, and our identity with the suffering becomes less and less. And that's the ultimate of not being a victim, right? Is you're empowering yourself and you're becoming the person you want to become in the world, despite having had injuries or
mhm.
things that have resulted in bad outcomes of surgery or whatever that cause pain.
Yeah.
We can still have a beautiful, rich life and be a paraplegic or a quadriplegic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever read the book, and then they made it into a movie, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly?
I have.
Yeah, that is one of my top three favorite books.
Mm.
And for those who've never read this story, it's, this um, French magazine. I think he was a magazine editor, and he um, ends up becoming. I don't remember them. You would probably know the medical term, but he's essentially frozen in his body. He's stuck, and he can only blink
He
his
had a
left
stroke
eye.
in a particular part of the brain where it basically you are like you're frozen. You can't move your limbs and you can't communicate. And the only thing he could do is blink his eyes.
And he wrote this beautiful memoir
Hmm.
through blinking his eyes to the person who then transcribed and wrote his the most beautiful observations, which really harkens to what we're talking about here, of just like the simplest things of recalling, like the smile on his child's face, and all of the what he could see out his window, from the bed he was in, and the way his nurse smelled, and all of these incredible things that ended up completely changing him before his death, changing his identity, or expanding his identity before his death, that all came through very simple observation. Now, he
Hmm.
had to go and suffer that to get to that place, or maybe he didn't have to, but that's what happened, at least in his story. We don't have to have that be our fate, right? We can
Right.
actually do that now, do that today. Don't wait until some tragedy happens where you are stuck, and that is the only ways and means. We have this beautiful opportunity, and I love what you've written. I love the whole method. I hope that you and Jake continue the research, and continue bringing more of this beautiful concept into the world. And it sounds like you are, at least through all of the workshops that you're doing and continue to do. Is there anything that you'd like to leave with the audience today before we sign off?
Well, if we have a moment, I'd love to read a little bit from our epilogue, the closing of our
Yeah,
book, if that's okay. Because,
please.
and first, I just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to be here,
Mm.
Carissa. And it was really lovely having you in our group program as well. So thank you so
Well, it's been my
much.
pleasure.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're welcome. Thank you.
yeah. And I love hearing from your listeners. If people want to just reach out to me, my email is michael@thepowervaw.com, and love hearing from people that have found this practice to be helpful and transformative. Or
Yes.
if you're struggling, let us know. Like we're there to be of support. We're just really
Awesome.
driven and motivated to help people out and make the world a better
And I'm going to
place.
put all of those links and ways to connect to you in the show notes so that people can do that.
Thank you. So what I want to just basically share from our epilogue is that, in our conversations today, we talked a lot about how this practice can help us as individuals, but I'd love to leave today with talking about how awe can really help change the world. And I think we need that more than ever right now.
Yes.
So the implications of awe go well beyond personal transformation. Awe touches everything, and perhaps most telling is the effect it has on others. We're wired to attune to others' behaviors and moods. Our nervous system senses the emotions of those around us. Just as being the recipient of a warm smile can lighten our mood, when we're in awe, those around us feel it too. Awe is contagious, so practicing the awe method is one not so small way we can contribute to the world. In this book, we've covered how the awe method is grounded in science, that a whole body of science supports that awe changes lives. So we have a big, simple crash ending to the power behind the simple practice of the awe method. If practiced frequently enough by enough people, a critical mass, as it were, everyone would experience a significant heightened shift in consciousness. Awe changes us, and when we share our awe, we change the world. How can we be in awe of someone and physically or emotionally harm them? How can
Mm.
we be in awe of the natural world and destroy it? How can we be in awe of life itself and not live as if every day were a miracle? In awe, the tone of every conversation, from personal to political, shifts from having an agenda to being open and curious. Our conversations impact how we raise our kids, how we help our aging parents, how we treat our spouse, how we participate in community, how we mentor or supervise people, how we govern a city, and how we lead a nation. We can think of no downside to practicing the awe method because awe is the light, the appreciation of nature in different cultures, the curious and open mind, the generous and giving soul. These days, we need awe more than ever. Awe awaits you and surrounds you in the ordinary moments of your life. Like the view of the stars that fill the night sky, awe is free and always available. All you need to do is pay attention to what you value, appreciate, and find amazing. Wait, and then exhale and expand into the unlimited timelessness of awe.
Mm. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Carissa.
That's so beautiful. Uh, I wanted to go further. I wanted to talk more, but